welcome to our 127th episode under Trans Literature series. As you all know, it's been a forum for all the inspiring authors and personalities, and we've been discussing their books, discussing a lot of book-related and we've issues, and also been coming to know them. So welcome Alokeji and Maanas on our platform. It's such a pleasure to
Thank you for the welcome. Thank you. It's great to be here for a second time. We had a wonderful experience in the first episode, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to replicate that here.
To be at the right place with the right host is a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure, and I'm really, really overwhelmed to have you both once again. It's been a long overdue conversation, and I really, really congratulate you on your new book, On the Trail of Thugs and Thieves. It is a very interesting read, and you must definitely read this book and definitely give the authors your review. And Alokji, as we all know, you are a decorated cop. You've been a gold medalist from IIT and IPS. 37 years of service to the nation, and putting it all together in 8 stories in this book. So how difficult was it for you to be able to shortlist those 8 stories out of, I'm sure, so many of them that are willing to come out?
Well, not really easy. But one of the things that we did was to keep them chronological. Starting from the earliest part of my career, which began in Gorakhpur. So the first story is about Gorakhpur, till Dehradun, which was my last posting. So all these have been chronologically placed in the book also. So I thought one story from almost one station each would have meant that about 8 stories, 8 or 10. Yes, indeed, it was not easy to pick stories because there were so many of them. And you can understand a police officer sees stories every day, many times. So really, it's not easy to pick up just 8.
So very right. And it must have been so difficult to plan this book together with Maanas. And coming to you, Maanas, I must tell everyone that Maanas is such a versatile person. I mean, he's multifaceted. Be it music, be it writing, be it painting. And even Alokji, I mean, paints so well. I am still to see the paintings, and I'm looking forward to see the paintings by both of you whenever I meet you physically. So, I mean, how did you really both piece together this book as a team? This is your second or the third book together?
This is the second one together, but there are more in the pipeline that I can assure you.
Yes.
And actually, it's because we were brainstorming for ideas that this book happened.
Yes.
Not every story can be presented as a full book. And we realize that there are many interesting stories which can make for just good short stories. And so we must tell them. And the way to do that was to compile a book of short stories. Also, these are not sensational cases which publishers would have looked at favorably as a single book. But when it became a compilation of interesting stories, then suddenly we had this slew of offers from publishers also, and they became extremely interested in the idea. The fact that these stories all begin with a simple burglary and then lead to much larger exposés was something which was a common thread among the stories. And so putting all this together was a result of initially brainstorming for other books. And that is how this happened. So once we spoke to our agent at the book bakers, they said that, yes, this seems like an idea which is workable. And then while other books were being written, we kept revisiting these stories, shaping these stories. And as luck would have it, after Murder in the Bylanes, this is the second book which has come out. And the others which have been planned for a very long time will still take a while to see the light of day.
Actually, Neeta, I'm glad that Maanas is a very good investigator too, because he investigates in me stories which are lying somewhere or the other in my person. So he prices them out and he tells me which stories must be told. So to have a co-author like him helps.
Oh, and I must tell you this, that I have been careful in the sense that there are only 8 stories also because if this book does really well, then I'm looking at a sequel. Who knows?
In fact, I'm looking at multiple sequels because I'm sure there's so many stories still to be waiting to be told. And as I read in the book that Alokji mentions that Maanas has the uncanny ability to spot what is worth recording for posterity. Yeah. I totally agree with you, Alok. You have a most fantastic co-writer. And as it is also mentioned in the book, you and I believe totally that you are India's favorite crime writing duo. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alokji, I know it is very, very difficult for you to pick your favorite one, but would you like to talk about one story, perhaps not giving the entire story away to our viewers, to our readers who will be subsequently reading this book, about one of your favorite books? I know mine, that was the Saving the
That's a tough one.
Again, to
Yes.
select one maybe out of it. Okay, I will say that from the point of view of an investigator's satisfaction, I found a story about bullet bites.
Bullet digs deep.
Bullet digs deep.
Digs deep. Yeah.
There were very fine observations made, which led to this particular expose. So I'll say that from the point of view of an investigator, the satisfaction was great in this particular story. This action by the police, and I was lucky to be associated with what the police did in this case, and ultimately managed to get the culprit. So I think this was satisfying from a professional point of view. As for this story, which gave me a lot of hope for India and a lot of good things to look forward to, was the story about Samundari.
Yeah, I totally agree.
In which you see there's a simple village girl coming from the most backward area. She is herself from a very backward community. And yet she has the spunk, she has the grit and determination to stand above all that rot and be able to shine like she did. So she not only did good for herself, she was a great help to us also in solving a very important crime. So I think from the point of view of seeing justice being done in real terms and involving the victims in the work of the police, I think this is a very important aspect which many people do not realize is how important it is. Because a policeman is just like any other person. And his success would depend on how the civilians, how the people in general come forward to help the police in their work. So from that point of view, I'm happy with this story.
It's so nice, they have happened years back and you still remember. And I know you've also mentioned the role of your wife in putting all those stories together.
Do you remember all the finer details?
Yeah. I mean, it's very difficult unless you have such a great team together. Your son, your wife, all putting these stories together, reminding you of the intricacies. Otherwise, I'm sure this would have been very difficult to write. Yes, Manas, you were saying something.
What I was saying was that I'm glad he picked Samundari because in that story in particular, my mother remembered so much about her because there was a stint which he spent at our place, and we tried to help her out and they tried to help her out. I can't say we because I wasn't born at that time, but there are so many details we got from her because they both look at people differently. So she's better at observing the appearance of a person, their tenor, their accent. So those finer details often in character building come from her. So it's really a team. There's no doubt about it.
Yes, and I noticed that also in the earlier book that we discussed, Murder and the Bylines. It's been seriously, I mean, she's always, in fact, in the first chapter where she wanted to accompany you to the scene of the crime, that really shows her spunk and wanting to...
An exposure of a nubile young woman to the rough and tumble of the life that a policeman leads.
One can make her...
After marriage,
soon after
she
marriage.
knew what she had signed
within weeks of marriage, actually.
Yes. And how about you, Manas? I mean, if you had to pick one of the important stories, which one was your favorite? Since you've been the part of the process of writing everything.
I'm very happy I'm answering this question second, because you often get a lot of pointers from the other person answering. But for me, it has always been Who Was She? It's been one of my favorites. And one of the big reasons is actually the poem at the end. He gave me a sense of what had been said in that school function about women empowerment. And I was asked to piece together something which would sound like it is being read out by a school child. And what is amazing is that so many readers who have reached out to me now have spoken about that poem after reading the book, and that touches me, particularly women. And I think that is extremely important. If women felt that it was empowering, or they felt that it did justice to their struggle, it's something which makes me very happy.
Very nice. I think, as I mentioned earlier, Saving the Prime Minister definitely was one of my favorite stories, and also Zenith
So we all
Aman
have
to the
different
rescue.
stories.
We have stories, but yes, all of them are worth reading.
We now have 4 out of 8 as favorites here.
Even Zenith Aman to the rescue, where yeah, I was trying to remember the name of the story. Yes, Alokji, I've always wanted to know, since I've been an ardent fan of yours. I've read all your books, and I've always wanting to know. I don't remember whether I've asked you earlier, but how have all these individual stories left a mark on you? I know the very fact that you're writing them, the very fact that you're putting it in paper does mean that they have always been close to your heart. It has meant a lot for you. But emotionally, how have they left a mark? How do you look back? That we really serve coming from you will be really, like to get into that.
Neeta, this question must be answered in a little detail.
Sure.
And see, oftentimes the image of a policeman is one of a brute individual with those long mustache and foul language.
I know.
And so at times, even my bosses told me that you're too soft. And at times my bosses said, "Ke aap to bade shairana tabiyat ke aadmi hain." Now, by shairana tabiyat, they meant that I should have no finer sensibilities, it seems. And but yet I had the, as you mentioned earlier, I'm a painter. I'm very fond of poetry, especially Urdu poetry. And so I've grown up in an atmosphere where these finer aspects of life were looked at very closely. And therefore, there was a sensitivity for emotions of everyone you came across. And so throughout my career, I saw a lot of characters who could be sort of, pigeonholed as good, bad, and somewhere in between. But then there are always overlapping qualities in each one of them. And in case you are able to find those qualities, maybe they tell you something. And in case you are sensitive to those things, they leave an impress on your heart, on your mind. And later, when you recall your 37 years as a police officer, you said 37 years of service to the nation. I think the service to the nation begins the day you were born. And till date, I am quite confident that I am doing good for the nation. But all those 37 years, of course, I came across people who were generally suffering, generally having a bad time, generally being violated, facing violence from so many quarters. So that's why I can remember them. I can remember their faces. I can remember their pains and problems. So that is how I write these stories, tell these stories.
So very wonderful. In fact, I like to read what K. Vijay Kumar, the former Director General of the CRF, recommended about your book, that young officers should read the gripping and most absorbing story and the book with the idea to pick up tips for carrying out investigations. I mean, he's an author himself, Mr. Vijay Kumar, and writing and reading the book definitely, motivates one person and really inspires. So how does it...
One of the most talented officers also. He's an outstanding colleague to have. Yes. And he covered himself with glory in every job that he did.
That's very right. So how does it feel, Manas, when such reinforcements for the book come and people really write to you, and how does it feel?
It feels absolutely wonderful. I remember having read Veerappan, which was Mr. K. Vijay Kumar's book back in the day. And I was very moved by it. I, in fact, spoke to him about it, got my copy signed. And so when that author comes back to you so many years later and endorses your book, nothing like it. It's very heartwarming. And the author-cop combination here works even better because you feel like both aspects of the book have been looked at. That is the technical aspects and also the writing. Apart from this, the common reader is the most important person for me. And I have received heartwarming reviews, particularly from women, and that is something which really pleased me. And also, even though I must say we haven't been able to use gender neutral terms in the book, but people on the spectrum have also reached out to me and said that they felt the book had an inherent sensitivity to it, which is something he was talking about. And I think it comes across in writing with him because the sensitivity as a policeman adds so much to the story. I think we wouldn't have had the same depth or the same understanding of the characters in the story had he not been looking at them as victims of crime, and even at criminals as people who could be reformed. I must say that the first tendency is to look at a criminal as somebody who's evil and then beat them into submission. But but the fact remains that the way to actually take a society forward is to try and reform the criminal, because there will be a day when that criminal joins the mainstream again, unless he has gone in for a heinous crime. So I think that sensitivity which comes with the domain has gone through to the readers, and the response has therefore been wonderful. Something which I'll perhaps never forget for the rest of my life.
Fantastic, fantastic. And what message, Alokji, were you trying to really give through this book? I mean, or perhaps maybe some element that, yes, this is the message you were trying to give, but yes, some elements also surprised you. Something that you'd like to talk about?
The honest answer is that when this book was being written, I did not think of a message at all. I was only trying to tell interesting stories. But from the stories that I read later on, and after the book was published, I went through my own book. And so I read it more like a reader than the person who has written this with Manas. So my feeling is that there is a message in this. One I said earlier is that the general public and police have to come together to fight crime. The second message is that the police officers down the line must learn to understand the emotions of the victims and should also treat the criminals as if they are human beings. Of course, they are human beings. They have done something wrong. So you have to probe and find out what has gone wrong with them, that such a thing has happened. Maybe that way we can help the society more. So there are these two messages, one for the lay reader, the other for the policeman who reads this.
And how about you, Manas? What do you feel about this?
So my focus was on the messages right from the beginning. I wanted every story to send out a specific message, and I think that is really something which works for this book. After every story, you feel like introspecting and thinking about how things shape individuals, shape characters, shape even criminals. So right from the messages of women empowerment to understanding interfaith unions to uh, life in the most rural parts of the country. I think all of these things have come together to deliver extremely important messages of grit, of perseverance, of standing up to adversity, of never losing hope, of giving love, sharing love, being there for others. Every story comes across with one or the other message. Not all of them are positive, but certainly all of them are worth learning.
Indeed.
Ma'am, we lost your audio there for you.
I really have been wanting to know, because you've written such beautiful stories, 8 of them strung together, somewhere, leaving great message in their own way. So what do you think makes a real good story? What is your experience of writing a real story which really is selling, which people are getting close to? So what is that trick that one should learn?
I wish I knew the secret sauce. I would have used it. But I feel like character building is extremely important. Even in a short story, the reader must have a connect with every character. You should feel for every character. Even if the character is there for a couple of paragraphs, introduce them. Even if you say something like his shirt was not tidy and his nameplate was not in place, you know that this person is a certain way. And there has to be a connect which you establish with the character. They must not be just names, which come and go. Otherwise, that relatability vanishes.
And so you like to comment on this? What is your experience in writing a real story which works? This is going to really help out the inspiring authors, the budding authors who are going to get inspired reading your short stories in this particular book.
I hope people do get inspired. But what I would say is that there are two things that Manas mentioned are very important. The detail about the characters in the story. Of course, that is what compositely makes the story itself. But then happenings have got to be interesting enough to keep the reader glued to what is being written. So you cannot really pick up banal happenings and then think that somebody will be very happy to read about it. So luckily these 8 stories, I guess, for instance, you mentioned the story about the Prime Minister.
Oh, yeah.
The security of the Prime Minister is taken for granted by most people. People don't even know what goes into it. And therefore, in this particular story, you would see that the reader is also getting educated in the kind of tension there is, in the kind of challenge there is, and what can go wrong. In this particular case, as you know, I will not talk about it, but something seriously wrong had happened. And so this was an interesting aspect also because the person who did it was habitually doing something which he had always done.
He didn't even realize the importance of those documents.
Unaware of what was the importance of what he was doing.
Yeah.
So ultimately, I think a story has to have that kind of interest in it, that kind of magnetism in it. Also, the characters, as he says, have to be etched out very well.
And one more point. The place must be made, the setting must be made a character in the story.
Yes.
You have to treat it as an extremely important thing. For instance, in the first story about Zeenat the Man to the Rescue,
yes.
That story talks about the area. It first gives you a sense of where you are so that you feel for the characters based on where they are placed. In the same way, saving the Prime Minister, there's a description of the compound, where things were, how they were placed. The reader must feel like they are right there and they are feeling the tension or for that matter the happiness. It's extremely important to create an atmosphere.
So very right. And even saving the Prime Minister every time, I was worried about that blue book that we were talking about. I hope it was a thief. I hope Mr. Saran didn't finally resign or something. I mean, that was, that kind of visualization was running inside my, and I was thinking, I hope it did not get wet enough that you couldn't retrieve the documents. All that, as a reader, I'm telling you, whenever you're reading a book and it is well sketched, you're kind of into the story altogether. So anything else that you'd like to talk about the book we have spoken about? Yes, one part, I'd like to definitely talk about, I know you're working with book bakers as your agent. So how does one really go about choosing somebody who markets your product well, who helps you in putting it all together, guiding you from time to time?
The book bakers is in this business for quite some time now. And luckily, Suhail, who is the person who runs this particular establishment, has learned the ropes very well. So when I was the first time author of a book, when I wrote Barabanki Narcos, at that point in time, I was a babe in the woods, certainly. And so I needed some hand holding. This was done by Suhail. So having a capable person representing you is a very useful thing to have. One. Secondly, which story would appeal to the reader is something that's a feedback which comes first of all from this person. And then he pitches this story or this book to the publishers. They are the second post where it has to be assessed. And if they find it interesting enough, they'll pick it up. Of course, there's a commercial angle also at which they very closely look. So I guess that to be able to understand the importance of what you're talking about in the book is very important. You should be able to tell it in a manner that the reader finds interesting. Many of very good stories may not be told in the best manner possible. And the vice versa is sometimes true, that ordinary stories are told so well that a person cannot peel away from reading it. So I think these are the elements which go into it.
Yeah. And I think there are two distinct halves to that question. One is that, yes, you must have an agent representing you. That's what I feel, at least. I would recommend that any aspiring author should have an agent, because they help you understand the pulse of the industry. And pitching a book is one part of it. So when you pitch a book, that's a different challenge. You create a product which appeals to a publisher. And then once the book is out, the marketing is something which, you can take a call on. Whether you want to go with the agency, whether you want to outsource it, whether you want to take it all on yourself. I've tried all three. And honestly, I'm still figuring it out, because marketing is perhaps the most challenging part of writing a book these days. And I must say that writing the book and getting it edited is just half the battle. Now, the post-release work is as much as it is pre-release.
Very
It's a
time
lot of
consuming
work.
also.
Very time consuming and a lot of work.
I know the book launches and the marketing part of it. And then also, I suppose even the title takes a lot of time to get shortlisted. And that really does the trick. On the Trail of Thugs and Thieves. So who gave the
Yes.
idea? Was it Manas or Alokji?
No,
Idea
not
was
us.
the title.
The credit for the title has to go to Jyotsna Mehta of Om Books International. She was our editor, and I must add, she's a wonderful editor. And so this is entirely her title. And True Accounts of Crime from the Hindi Heartland and other things, yes, all this came from us. And I'm very glad Om decided to add India's favorite crime writing duo, which is a huge compliment.
Yeah.
But on the trail
It's
of...
very true, quite true. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But on the Trail of Thugs and Thieves is entirely Jyotsna's idea. And we cannot stake any claims in it.
Yeah, and because it itself tells you that yes, it is a story of thefts and burglaries. Puts it all together. So I must say, definitely a comprehensively written book and very well written, quite compact. You can just finish it like I did in few hours, and you can go back to your favorite story later. But yes, you can just read it in one go. And any last words from both of you before we wind up this wonderful session?
Yes, thank you very much, Neeta, for being
My
so
pleasure.
kind, remembering us on occasions
Always.
like these. And I'm glad that you have also made an offer to host us when we come to Delhi. That'll be great.
Yes.
So wonderful to be interacting on this platform, and I wish you all the success.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes,
Manas.
my final submission would also be on the same lines. I'm very grateful to Trends Literature Series. I must say that it's just not the association during the sessions, but also the fact that you keep following what the authors are doing on social media and you keep in touch. It's incredible to build this community of literature. And I think you are really doing a human service in that sense. And regarding the book, I would request everybody to please get your copy. It's a very interesting book. It's different from what we have written earlier, which is one of the reasons I think you should pick it up. It's a shift of genres in a way. These are 8 short stories and of burglary, which led to larger exposés. And I'm sure this book will be fun. And as Neeta ji said, that you can read the book in a short amount of time, but it'll leave you with a lot to think about over a long period of time.
Buying this is a good idea for another reason, because the money that accrues will go to the victims of the Odisha train tragedy.
Yeah.
So we would request more and more people to buy it so that those people are helped a little more.
Yes. Our proceeds from the authors go entirely to the victims of the Odisha tragedy.
Very, very noble thought, I must say. And
thank you very much.
Thank you so much for gracing our platform. And I'm sure On the Trails of Thugs and Thieves will really do well, as other books of yours, Babanki, Narcos, Murder in the Bylanes. And yes, you are definitely, as I've always said, India's favorite crime writing duo.
Thank you.
Thank you. We wait for many more books to come. And I wish you all the more successes. Just a reminder to everyone, please do subscribe to our YouTube channel so that we can have more and more interesting authors like Alokji And
yes, we must say that. Please share the link, upvote the video, subscribe to the channel, and make sure that you share it with your friends so that this channel grows by leaps and bounds.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Such a pleasure.